A very good morning to you. You are watching Newsline this morning with me, Chathuranga Hapuarachchi. Now, as promised, we are going to talk to you about the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement and certain key factors in it that have been highlighted by professional bodies in Sri Lanka. Yesterday, we spoke to Kapila Pereira and we spoke to you about the issues pertaining to Mode 3 and Mode 4 of this particular free trade agreement. Today I'm going to talk to Dr. Ananda, the past president of the Institute of Engineers. Now, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Today we are now going to take you through the modes in the particular free trade agreement, but we are going to talk to you about the legal aspect or the arbitration, how things like that have worked out in this free trade agreement, whether they are in favor of both the countries, and especially whether Sri Lanka is losing anything when it comes to this Sri Lanka-Singapore free trade agreement.
In fact, actually, I will just touch upon the modes also initially. Now, you said you discussed about the Mode 3 and Mode 4. Now, although when we questioned from the minister regarding the Mode 1 and Mode 2, what he said was actually Mode 1 is already taking place. That is identified as cross-border supply, where you get the services from here by having a contact person in another country, and it transfers to computers, internet and various things. The problem is actually once you enter into a free trade agreements, although it is going to legalize what's happening now, the danger is that the Mode 1, then it will become part of international law. Now I can give you an example. Let's say somebody is taking services for photography or printing photographs and various things from another country under Mode 1, where we send the soft copy of the photographs, they send the hard copies. And later, if the government realizes that there is going to be a lot of draining of foreign exchange and also our photographers are losing jobs, then if the government wants to impose any regulations, the problem is government cannot impose additional regulations affecting the contracting parties, overriding the present, whatever the prevailed conditions in the country.
So you cannot make a new law after the bilateral agreement is reached.
So that is the legal side of it. So therefore, even if it is going to affect our small scale people, entrepreneurs, etc., still then all our hands are tied once you enter into the agreement. Even an aspect like this, when we question from the officers, they were not fully, I would say, they were not fully aware of the repercussions of these things when we question from them. So coming back to your question of arbitration, now it is a fact that internationally, when there is a dispute between the parties, normally under normal circumstances, it will be tried by arbitration. But if I am a private entrepreneur, and if I enter into a contract with another person, I have the choice. Supposing if I am importing something, I have a choice whether I could have an arbitration clause, or I could avoid an arbitration clause. So the consequence of not having an arbitration clause would be that whatever, if there is a dispute between me and the other person, they have to refer to our court system, let's say commercial high court or whatever the court system. But when you have an arbitration clause in a contract, there is a compulsory requirement that it will be tried by arbitrators selected by both parties. But in arbitration, basically according to my understanding of this agreement, if there is a dispute on the Singaporean, let's say if there is a dispute, Singaporean disputes anything from the Sri Lankans, then arbitration will be conducted in Singapore. So mind you, this arbitration process, although it might be efficient in Singapore, but it's going to be a very costly thing. Now I will just give you an example of expenses of arbitration. Now we entered into a contract with hedging long time back, if you could remember, with the Deutsche Bank and various other banks. So this one is, I wouldn't say it is completely a commercial transaction, because people were arguing that this is like a gambling, so more or less. So when they enter into a commercial transactions, our government refused to pay the whatever increase in oil price. The bargain was actually, if the oil prices increases more than $200 per barrel, they will be paying the excess.
Yes.
If it is drops below a certain amount, they will be we will be paid what we have to pay them the difference between $100 and what is the difference between the current oil prices. Now, in such a situation, the disputed matter, they said it is an investment dispute and therefore it has to be referred to international arbitration. And Sri Lanka lost that arbitration. Only the cost of arbitration, I think we had to pay about $80 million for this deal. Only the arbitration fees is Sri Lankan rupees 1.2 billion. So although people say no, it's going to be resolved by arbitration, it is fast, efficient, it costs a lot of money.
But that is the way. Is there another way to solve an issue like this when it comes to bilateral agreement?
No, the only thing is actually the same matter was referred to the Supreme Court also. But the thing is, international arbitration, I have a report saying that they say the Supreme Court of this country does not have power to resolve this dispute. So therefore that overrides the normal provisions of the court system in Sri Lanka by having this arbitration clause. It is international agreements, you refer to arbitration, but the option is between the parties. Now here, automatically we have to resort to arbitration because it's governed by an international agreement.
Doctor, though Singapore is a small country by geographical margins, they are a powerful country when it comes to,
correct.
If you take a look at this free trade agreement, you cannot expect the powerful country to compromise what they want with a less powerful country. But on the other side, if things, so what all of these professional bodies, this is where my question is going, when all of these bodies get together and say, here are these issues, and when we take a look at them and say, this is what the government has to say and this is what your as professional bodies are saying, can Sri Lankans expect everything to be all nice and jolly when it comes to free trade agreement?
No, I wouldn't say that. Probably we can't say, as you said, we can't say that everything has to be decided in our favor. Now there might be certain areas where we have to have support from other countries. Now, the government's concern is actually investment on this free trade agreement. Their main concern is investment. Now, for example, I will tell you, now in the Singapore agreement, now there are two columns, one giving explanatory notes of where now all these agreements. On the top they say regarding services, explanatory notes. Now, this is very important because when you are interpreting a document, explanatory notes comes first. Now in Singapore, from the Sri Lankan side, what we have agreed actually, if a person is working in a company for the last year, or and also he's having 5 years experience, he's a qualified person to work in Sri Lanka. So therefore our assessment of a qualification is, if I have worked for an organization and I have 5 years experience, I am an expert to work in Sri Lanka. But Singapore assessment is not that. They say you have to have certain qualifications in order to sit for work in Singapore, and sometimes you might even have to pass examinations, you have to have licenses. So therefore restrictions that are imposed by the Singapore is actually they do another assessment of us. Merely because I have worked for an engineer for 30 years or whatever years, it does not mean I can automatically go and work in Singapore on investments. But in case of Singaporeans, it is not the case. They have said no, there is no assessment of qualifications as long as he has a manager or he is an expert. Now who defines a manager? We defines a manager and say the person must have 5 years experience. Now
this is mentioned in the FTA?
Yes. Is this the way that people are selected as experts in order to work in another country? So therefore, there is a major differences in these things. And I disagree with you because although Singapore is a developed country, they have a lot of things to gain by having agreement with Sri Lanka because our land is extensive. And we have a very large sea area covering up to about 300 miles from the coast. So therefore, there are a lot of things that they also can gain. The other danger of accepting, without accepting qualifications, qualifying on their position is that, for example, let's say if a person, if a Singaporean establishes a hospital here, And when they want to recruit people for the hospital, they might say these people have worked as nurses for 5 years, therefore they are automatically qualified to work as nurses. Also, these people have worked as doctors, so therefore they are automatically qualified because they have experienced 1 year, they have worked for 5 years. It is not a case actually. They have to, not only they have to work there, they must have standard qualifications which is acceptable to us. So there are major lapses on this agreement.
Dr. Ranasinghe, now we know that the liberalization of certain industries in our country is also spoken about by all of these professional bodies. Yesterday and the day before, when we read through what the copy, the 1083 pages of this FTA was, we understood that at certain places there is a classification called CPC.
Yes.
And if you go further, the annexures for this EPC is not included in the FTA. You have to take it down separately, download it from the internet and go through it.
Yeah.
According to the Minister of Development Strategies and International Trade, there is no liberalization beyond Mode 3, and that too, people, PR holders or Singaporean citizens who have worked for over 1 year will be allowed to come here. If that person has a presence in a third country, heavy presence in a third country, that person will not be allowed. There are certain regulations. But when we spoke to once again the professional bodies and said, no, look, this is what the minister has to say. They say the trade has, the industry has been liberalized. If you take a look at key classifications, he has mentioned numbers, CPC 802, 801, things like that. They say, the professional bodies say that this has been liberalized to the level to the drivers, the laborers as well. How true is this statement?
In fact, actually, I also haven't gone through, because it's a huge document to whether the liberalization has been done to that extent. But supposing if they make an investment of this country under Mode 3, which is capital investment, they can have people, natural people working on these companies. And what I say is, actually, although there are big names specified saying that only executives, managers and experts can work here, their qualifications are not properly defined. So therefore they can have anybody coming here in the pretext that he is a manager, executive or an expert. So that is a serious danger. And the other thing is, actually, now we have been discussing we went to initial discussions about various issues on visas and things. Now here it says a visa will be given for a specific period for 1 year or so, in enabling them to come and work here. Now the problem is, actually, it is happening in Sri Lanka. A person comes 1 year, he works here for 1 year, then probably he takes a break for 1 week or holiday or 1 month's holiday, go back and again come back here 1 year. So therefore this 1 year restriction actually doesn't mean anything. Now in any case, if a person works in another country, he would like to go back to his own country and come back. So therefore these restrictions that has been imposed does not penetrate sufficiently into the agreement, enabling for us to have a control of these things.
Dr. Ranasinghe, isn't this a problem where the government of this country does not have a proper trade policy? Isn't that the problem here? Because if you take it from the outside, if you take a look at things here, free trade agreements are not bad for a country. We need to move ahead. But because the government does not have the proper framework to go into these free trade agreements, there are issues arising. Isn't that the problem?
That is one of the reasons. Government does not have proper arrangements in order, or we are not geared to have these liberalized free trade agreements. Now, for example, you can see our environmental laws. Now, maybe about, say, 3 years back, there was an issue where aerated water or aerated bottle company, they discharge certain things to the Kalin River. Now, if you do something like that in Singapore, I don't think you will be able to do any business with Singapore, and you will be subject to huge fines. Now here, probably we don't know what has happened even. So therefore, we don't have proper legal system in order to safeguard our interests. We don't have proper monitoring system. That is the other serious matter, because now there are a lot of issues which has crop up internationally. I would say in other countries where the investors, although they have come in the pretext of investment, they have polluted the entire water supply system in certain countries. Now, I can't exactly remember which countries. There is a case in respect of arbitration where a country, where an investor, I think probably in Germany and another country, where an investor has put up a nuclear power station. Now the German government, even though it is a powerful government, they want to stop this nuclear power plant because there was penetration of nuclear to the environment. But however, in spite of, because they have strengthened their regulations by German government, they were unable to do without paying compensation because the conditions that were prevailed at the time of signing the agreement cannot be changed without paying compensation to the investor. So therefore, what I believe is actually we must have all regulations in place and we must have all mechanisms in place in order to control those things. So without these things, we can't impose additional conditions whenever a problem crops up, because that violates the provisions of the treaty.
So I'm trying to get this right, Dr. Ranasinghe. Now, what you're saying is once we ratify this particular Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, we cannot impose any new laws that affect the two countries. Is that what you're trying to say?
Basically, let's say we have environmental laws saying that the discharge of effluents to the streams or whatever, effluents to the output certain levels, let's say some milligrams per meter or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden we have realized that these discharges are too much according to the current standards. So therefore, if we want to I would say have stringent measures in order to control those discharges, we can't impose new regulations, because the investors, what they will say is actually we have come and invested in this country on the prevailing rules. So therefore, their profits and their overheads, everything were calculated based on the existing laws of the country. So if the country try to impose additional regulations, they might have to spend additional money in order to satisfy the requirements of the legal provisions. So those conditions cannot be imposed because their investment plan depends on what was prevailed in that country, legal system.
Other side of this question, Dr. Ranasinghe, now let's say at any point Sri Lanka or Singapore understands that there is no point on carrying forward this free trade agreement. Can Sri Lanka pull out?
There is a serious issue, because thing is actually, I will tell you another example so that now there is a company called Phil Morris. They have invested certain amount of money on tobacco in Australia and also in Uruguay. Now what happened was actually these governments, they wanted to impose additional conditions on these tobacco companies, and they requested to print I would say health note on the cigarette packets.
Pictorial warning.
Correct, exactly. But when they imposed those regulations, the Phil Morris went to courts or arbitration and said, no, we have given license in order to practice in your country without restrictions that you are imposing now, the pictorial warnings as you said. So therefore they asked billions of dollars as compensation. So that is the danger. So therefore we can't probably rectify or correct our regulations as the progresses move, when the thing moves. So we have to have everything in place. Now in order to do that, actually I have serious doubts whether we have a good team consisting of all professionals in the other industries also participating in these negotiations and discussions.
But Dr. Ranasinghe, if you take a look at what the minister and the ministry has to say about it, they say that all stakeholders have been consulted and they have spoken to everyone who's concerned.
No, actually I think there were, IESL, I wouldn't say, we may have participated only 1 or 2 discussions, but the drafts were not shown to us. And even before signing, we were not educated on the matters, especially concerning liberalization of services. So therefore, we would say that although we were invited for few discussions, or probably there had been so many discussions, few discussions, I don't think our requirements were considered in preparation of this agreement. That is the very reason all the professions, including architects, quantity surveyors, engineers, lawyers, etc., are opposing this agreement.
Dr. Ranasinghe, I want to take you back to the exit clause. Can Sri Lanka, if they decide at a certain point that they do not want to continue this free trade agreement, can they say, Singapore, we are pulling out?
We can have, although specifically it is not there, we can exit from this agreement, but at a cost. We might have to pay fairly large sums of compensation, because any investor who has come to this country would say, we were planning our returns for a period of 30 years or 20 years or whatever it is. So it's not that easy task to exit from this agreement.
Usually when you take a look at free trade agreement, is there a specific time frame that has been put in place to say this free trade agreement is for 30 years, 60 years, 99 years? Is there a time frame?
Generally there is no time frame for these free trade agreements, but the thing is, actually, even if we, as you said, even if we want to rectify, unless both parties agree for such changes, it is very difficult to deviate from the conditions that we have entered into.
One thing that we noticed was that when you take a look at the clauses in the free trade agreement, there is a clause to say that this particular FTA is indefinite. Does that have a bearing to the Sri Lankans or to the Singaporeans?
I am not sure about that clause. If there is a clause like that, still then, although it might say indefinite, definitely there is a way out. But thing is, actually it is a very costly process.
Right. Dr. Ranasinghe, let's get back to Sri Lanka. We'll take a look at this from the Sri Lankan point of view. Now, isn't there anything good in this Singapore-Sri Lanka free trade agreement that we can be happy about?
Only thing is, actually now probably this country is expecting that there is going to be investment from these things, and also there is going to be jobs created. That was the main theme of this government when they came into power, creation of jobs by investment. But I would say, when we are anticipating investment from the other country, we have been telling at all these discussions that we participated, we must put our things in order, our house in order, basically. So since that has not been done, although we may get investment, which is positive, which is a positive sign, but still then we have to see at what cost that we are getting investment, because it is a responsibility for everybody. We have to protect our environment, we have to protect employment and various things. So I will give you an example. Let's say if a Singaporean firm comes here, one of the investments could be they can take up a running factory and they can employ their own people and run this one. So that is also investment according to this. So when you make an investment of that nature, you have to see whether we will be able to control their effluence, whether we have standards to, because let's see, our factory is producing 100 shoes per day, and if a Singapore factory takes over and they are going to produce 1,000 shoes per day, we have to see every aspect of this production. So I don't think, although we might have, I would say, legislation, scattered legislation in order to cover these things, we have a mechanism to control these things. So that is the danger of it, really.
Dr. Ranasinghe, now when we take a look at the world, there is a saying that no one can live as an island. Yes. But we are unfortunately or fortunately living in an island, and we had to reach out to the world to get investment, send out exports, bring in imports, things like that.
Yes.
Now when you take a look at a free trade agreement, that is one step easier to carry out these sorts of investments and exports and imports and etc. But every time when there is a talk of a free trade agreement in Sri Lanka, the professional bodies come out and start speaking about it and start criticizing it. Is there a reason for this to happen, or do you think as part of a professional body, is there a criticism is what that is it all? Is my question.
No, I think probably professional organizations, some professional organizations actually, they are not only interested in their profession, they also have interest on their country also. So probably I think the major mistake that we see on this, most of these investments, now we had signed FTA with India, which came into operation around 2000. Now we had a trade gap by probably maybe about 200 million when we signed this agreement.
Right.
Now presently it has grown very close to 1 billion. So therefore basically international agreements are in order to promote I would say business, trade, etc. for the development of weaker country. That is the whole theme of international agreement. They say that since we can't sell our products to another country, we will be facilitated by these taxes and tariffs and various things so that we can sell our products to another country. Now first we have to see whether this has been materialized or not. So this has not materialized. The trade gap between us and India has been ever increased now. So and also we must not, we shall not consider investment merely for the sake of having investment on this country. Now for example, now we sold our petroleum industry for probably about 40% of the shares to IOC. Now is that the investment that we should encourage in order for another country? Because what they do is they bring oil and fuel and various things from Singapore or from wherever it is available, and they sell us and correct foreign exchange. So that should be the we are completely discouraging that type of investment. Now let's say if there is a high tech or which is going to benefit or which our professionals are not able to perform on certain activities, that type of activities, if it comes as investment, I don't think there will be any objections from the professionals. We are not objecting merely for the sake of objecting these things. There is a reason for this.
Dr. Ranasinghe, thank you very much for coming on our program and explaining to us about this particular free trade agreement. We are going to be talking about the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement tomorrow as well, highlight some more issues that have been highlighted by these various professional organizations in our country. We have to mention to our viewers that we as a network are not against free trade agreements or the country reaching these types of agreements with other countries. We merely want to highlight the factors that have been highlighted by these professional movements, and we want the government to also take notice and provide their counter arguments if there are any to these allegations that are raised by various professional bodies in Sri Lanka. That is the point of interviewing individuals of the nature of Dr. Ananda Ranasinghe and getting their views on this particular Sri Lanka-Singapore Free Trade Agreement. So once again, Doctor, thank you very much for being here with us this morning and talking to us about the FTA.
Thank you very much.
That's all we have for you this morning from Newsline. We'll join you tomorrow as well and talk to you about the same topic, the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement. We hope to see you. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.